Let's talk about what you can do for the Ascended Masters. And in order to grasp this, you really need to understand what the Ascended Masters are here to do. And they're here primarily to do two things. They're here to help raise the earth to a higher level, raise the collective consciousness to a higher level, so we get rid of all of the negatives you see on earth: warfare, torture, crime, all kinds of selfishness and the way people treat each other. And thereby bring in a higher age, a golden age. So that the earth, as I've explained before, moves away from being an unnatural planet to becoming a natural planet. But they're also here to help people individually raise their collective consciousness, raise their individual consciousness. But by a number of people raising their individual consciousness, this also raises the collective consciousness. And really, if you look at history, you see that the outer physical events that are happening on Earth, they are just outpicturings of the collective consciousness. Warfare is an outpicturing of the deep divisions in the collective consciousness. But the fact that we have moved away from a situation where all nations were dictatorships to a place where many nations are democracies shows you that there has been a progression. There has been a raising of the collective consciousness, because only when you raise the consciousness can people grasp the importance of democracy and can even have the vision that you can have a government that respects your rights. So raising the earth, raising the collective consciousness, raising individual levels of consciousness. And of course, as I explained in my previous video, the pinnacle of raising individual consciousness is that a number of people reach the point where they can ascend from Earth. So, what can you do for the Ascended Masters? Well, the most immediate thing you can do is you can engage in the spiritual path, whereby you use the teachings of the Ascended Masters, use the tools they have given us to resolve your psychology. And this will, as you raise your collective, your individual consciousness, it will raise the collective consciousness, because you are part of the collective consciousness. The collective consciousness is actually pulling on you. It's pulling you down. So the only way to grow spiritually is to raise yourself beyond the collective consciousness, not only planetary, on a planetary level, but also where you grew up, in the environment you grew up in. But of course, as you overcome that resistance that seeks to pull you down, you are pulling up on the whole. So this is one way you help the Ascended Masters. The other way is that you can invoke spiritual light. And I talked about in my last video how the Masters are given the spiritual practice of these decrees, where you give this rhythmic verses so that you invoke spiritual light directly from the Masters, and you can direct it into specific conditions. And in my last video, I talked about you do this in personal conditions, but what you can do for the Ascended Masters is you can invoke the light and direct it into conditions outside yourself, in the collective consciousness, specific areas of society. And I have received a number of these tools from the Ascended Masters. They are called invocations, and you can find them on a website I have called transcendencetoolbox.com. transcendencetoolbox.com. And there are a number of these invocations that are geared towards specific changes, specific areas of society. And it's not that, you understand, it's not that these invoking the spiritual light works against other people's free will. It doesn't force other people. But you have to realize that, nobody really wants, or at least most people don't want, current conditions on Earth. They don't want there to be warfare and torture and poverty and all of this stuff. The vast majority of people on Earth don't want this. They just don't see an alternative, don't see how to overcome it. And as I said with democracy, there was a time where the collective consciousness was so low that very few people could see any value in democracy. Then gradually there was a raising of the collective consciousness. More and more people started seeing the value of democracy, started becoming open to talking about it, until there was this shift where suddenly there were some nations that created democracy. And this happened because the collective consciousness was raised. And that's what you can contribute to by giving these invocations where you invoke the light from the Ascended Masters. You can kind of compare it. It's not exactly the same, but you can compare it to, let's say, there's a dark mine where it's completely dark. Nobody can see anything. So everybody's fumbling their way around in the dark. But then when you gradually increase the light, very gradually increase the amount of light, suddenly people start seeing more and more. And of course, when they see something, well, they don't bump their head into a concrete wall if they see the wall, right? So once you see the value of democracy, people choose it. So it's not a matter of you forcing people to choose something. It's a matter of you helping people to see it, and therefore they will spontaneously choose it when they see it's better for them. And this is what you can do by invoking spiritual light. Now, the Ascended Masters explain that in the collective consciousness is basically like an energy field that surrounds the entire planet. And in this collective consciousness, there are some accumulations of fear-based energy, anger, hatred, fear, many other things. And these form kind of like a vortex. It's like a maelstrom, just like the water can start spinning. You can have these energy vortexes that are spinning. And the effect of this is that it pulls on people's emotional bodies. So it pulls them into a negative reaction. Typical example you can see is the Middle East, where for thousands of years there has been all of this anger, hatred between different tribes, different groups of people. And they have collectively created these energy vortexes. And many people, when they grow up, they're completely overpowered by these vortexes. They're not actually making a free choice to go into this anger. They are just brought up to hate another group of people, and the energies, the collective consciousness are so strong that they're just pulled into it. So what we can do for the Ascended Masters is to invoke spiritual light to transform some of that fear-based energy. And all of a sudden people will begin to see, hey, this isn't our only possible reaction. In fact, we don't even want to have this anger and hatred. Why are we always fighting each other? It would be so much better for all of us if we didn't. So this is a very important thing we can do for the Masters. And you have to also probably realize that why is it that we need to do this for the Ascended Masters? Well, it's because of the law of free will. As I have explained in several of my videos, Earth is an unnatural planet. And it became an unnatural planet because a majority of the people who were embodying on Earth in the distant past chose to go into this, what I've called the illusion of separation, use the consciousness of duality to build all of these ideologies and ideas that they were right and other people were wrong. So that's what makes an unnatural planet. You have this division of people into categories. We are right, we are the superior ones, and these other people are wrong. They are the ones that need to be eradicated, and we solve all our problems. This is the typical outcome of the duality consciousness. And this is allowed because there is a law of free will for each planet, where if a majority of the people who are embodying on that planet go into the duality consciousness, it can pull the entire planet down where it becomes an unnatural planet. And what that means is that the Ascended Masters cannot step in and change things on Earth. They cannot directly step in. The Ascended Masters have immense power. It can be extremely difficult to fathom the power that the Ascended Masters have. But as I've explained before, the Ascended Masters created the Earth. They have the power, the creative potential to create the entire planet. So they could remove war from Earth instantly by transforming the energy that pulls people into this spiral or this vortex of war. But they're not allowed to do so by the law of free will. But we, who are spiritual people and who are in physical embodiment, we have the right to say, We don't accept that there's war on Earth. And therefore, we are willing to invoke the assistance of the Ascended Masters to remove some of that energy that pulls people into war. So in other words, the Ascended Masters have the power to change Earth, but they don't have the authority. We have the authority to change Earth, but we don't have the power. The solution is bring the two together. We use our authority to invoke the power of the Ascended Masters so they can do something on Earth. But this isn't, of course, something that will happen instantly. There's a certain correspondence at the energetic level. In other words, we have to invoke a certain amount of energy, and this has a certain effect. The Ascended Masters can multiply what we're doing to a certain degree, but there's still some correspondence there. It's not like we can just say once and for all, hey, Ascended Masters, remove war right now. We have to give a certain amount of invocations and decrees in order to remove a certain amount of energy, and this is then what sets people free to make better choices. So on the immediate level, you can start raising your own consciousness, resolving your own psychology, which pulls up on the collective. You can invoke the light from the Ascended Masters, which gives them the authority to step in and do something about certain conditions. It's simply a matter of saying, look at yourself, look at your life. What have you been interested in? What is close to your heart? What do you react to? Is there something, for example, that you really think should not be here, should not be happening on Earth? Then you find some of these decrees and invocations that the Ascended Masters have given, and you give them, authorizing them to step in. For example, there's a book called Help the Ascended Masters Stop War that contains teachings about war and invocations for invoking the assistance of the Ascended Masters to stop war. There's dictatorships, there's ideology, there's fanaticism, there's many, many books on and many invocations on transcendencetoolbox.com for where you can invoke the light of the Masters and direct it into specific conditions. And so this is what you can do at the immediate level. But there's much more you can do. And again, this is where it's important to realize that you have a divine plan. You have a life plan that you created before you came into embodiment. And as you created it, you worked with the Ascended Masters that are close to you. And part of this plan, as I've explained, is resolution of your psychology. Because when you restore your psychology, you remove the blocks to the fulfillment of the outer aspects of your divine plan. In other words, the service you're here to give. So there's two aspects. There's personal growth, and there's a service to life, and even a service to the Ascended Masters. And in order to give that service, you have to resolve the psychology. That's why it's so important to resolve psychology. And that's why I've said in all of my videos that the essence of the spiritual path is psychology, psychology, psychology. Okay, so what might be in your divine plan of the service you could give to the Ascended Masters? Well, beyond the personal growth and raising the collective consciousness and invoking spiritual light, you may very well be that you have it in your divine plan to work with a specific Ascended Master to bring forth ideas for how to improve some aspect of life. And it could be a matter of looking at where you grew up. Was there some kind of issue that you felt very strongly about as you were growing up? So it could be that you chose to be embodied in that particular situation in order to help at the local level. But it could also be that you just had to come into embodiment at some place, and therefore your service is not in the local area, it's more of a general or planetary level. So there's, of course, any number of ideas that can be brought forth. I mean, what the Ascended Masters explain is that you look back in history and you look at the positive improvements that have happened here on Earth. And at the bottom of any improvement is an idea. And what is an idea? It's not a physical thing. It's just something in the mental, in the mind. But where does it come from? Well, essentially, all positive ideas come from the ascended realm. And so it's a matter of us realizing that we are down here in the physical body, this dense physical body, and we have this conscious mind that's often here at the physical level with the senses and everything. But the spiritual path is actually about shifting our attention away from the purely physical level, the body, the senses. We clear out our emotional body, which is the next one up from the physical level, so we can begin to see through the emotional body and all the confusion, the turmoil of the emotional energies that we transform by invoking light from the masters. Then we can start looking at the mental body, clearing out the mental body, and then we can look through the mental body and then go to the identity level, clear out our sense of identity, often what we were brought up with. And again, we remove that filter. So now we can more clearly look up to the Ascended Masters. I'm not talking physically looking up, but intuitively. And suddenly we begin to receive ideas from the Ascended Masters. And it can be all kinds of ideas, just a matter of how big of a connection do you have, how clear is your connection, how is your attunement. But often it'll be ideas in some area where we have expertise. And that's why it's often important for us to educate ourselves in a particular area of society. Or, when I say educate, I don't necessarily mean only going to school, but also getting any experience in a certain area. It can be hands-on experience, which is also invaluable. And so many times when we start getting a more clear, intuitive sense of our divine plan, we see what are the areas that are important for me to focus on, and where could I potentially bring forth an idea. And this can be an invention, it can be a new idea in some area of society, all kinds of things. But it can also be that part of your divine plan is not necessarily to receive a new idea, but to promote certain ideas that are already there, and that it is important to spread. Again, this could be in your local area, but it can also be in a different context. And in that context, we have opportunities that human beings have never had before with the internet. I mean, look how you can spread ideas. And I know you can look at the internet and see how in later years it's been used for spreading all kinds of negative ideas and propaganda and all divisive things that create hatred among people. But it's still a potential to spread positive ideas. And I'm not talking here about spreading the teachings of the Ascended Masters. I'm talking about spreading ideas. See, when I was young and naive and found my first spiritual movement, I was pulled into this. We have this wonderful meditation technique that can solve all problems. That doesn't matter, converting everybody to doing this meditation. Then my second spiritual movement was based on teachings of the Ascended Masters, and there was still this sense that, we have to get everybody to accept the Ascended Master teachings, then we'll change the earth. And I've seen the same in dozens of other spiritual movements, and I have transcended that level because it is really not a matter of making everybody believe in Ascended Masters. It's a matter of spreading ideas that people can see, yes, they're self-evident. This is the way it is. This is the way we should go in society. And so, in order to really know what your potential is to bring forth or to spread ideas and help the Ascended Masters that way, you have to be neutral. You have to strive to be as neutral as possible, because your intuition, as I've explained in one of my breakthrough videos, works best when you're in a neutral state of mind. And that's when you can see, yes, here's the idea that I'm here to promote. And then this is something you can really do for the Ascended Masters. Then there's, and I know I have talked about this in one of my How the World Works videos about what we can do to change the earth, but I'll talk about it here again because I want to put it all into this one video. And so what we can really do also is realize that there are certain beings, and I explained this again in the How the World Was Created video, that I call fallen beings, that are simply extremely self-centered. They are narcissistic, psychopathic, sociopathic, and they just want to prove God wrong, prove everybody else wrong but themselves. And they're willing to do anything they can to do this. And I've explained in several videos what they do, how they promote warfare and all kinds of negative things. And what we can do is we can call forth the judgment of Christ upon such people. And this is something that, again, I talked about being neutral in order to receive ideas. Well, in order to call forth the judgment of Christ, you have to be neutral. You can't do it with anger. You can't do it with fear, because then you're misqualifying energy. But when you reach a certain level of the spiritual path and you've resolved a certain amount of your own psychology, you can be in that neutral state of mind where you're not calling forth the judgment of Christ with any kind of anger against a certain person. You're being neutral about it. You can be firm and determined, but you're being neutral about it, and you are allowing the Ascended Masters to do whatever they want to do. And this is actually an important principle for how you can help the Masters, because I remember in my second spiritual movement, we also had these decrees for invoking light from the Masters, and we would give some decree sessions where several hundred people would be decreeing together for hours, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes longer. And often it would be for a specific purpose, like the end of world communism, for example. And a lot of people had a certain fear involved there, or a certain anger, And I look back at this and I realized this wasn't the highest approach, because we really need to be completely neutral. And we need to realize one thing. We are down here in physical embodiment. We are in this very dense environment, very dense energy, the dense collective consciousness. And even if we have found Ascended Master teachings, we don't see everything clearly. In other words, we have a limited perspective compared to the perspective that the Ascended Masters have. They are in the spiritual realm. They see something we don't see, and they have a much broader awareness of what it takes to raise planet Earth, what needs to happen, and how not to violate people's free will. So it's very, very important that when we make the calls to the Ascended Masters, we are as neutral as possible. We are making the calls, we are invoking the assistance of the Ascended Masters, but we leave it up to the Masters what they will do and how they will do it and when they will do it. We leave that up to their vision, which we know is higher than ours. That's very important, because the more neutral we are, the more we can do for the Ascended Masters, the more light can stream through us, and the more authority we give them to bring forth this judgment of the beings and people who are violating the law of free will. So what I'm saying is that when you understand how the law of free will works, you understand that, let's say there's a dictator who's suppressing an entire population. But the people aren't rebelling against this. So by the law of free will, if the people aren't rebelling against the dictator, he is allowed to stay there. And that's what you can see, for example, in North Korea, where there isn't enough of an uprising. And I'm not saying it's easy for them. I'm just saying there isn't enough of an uprising, of an awareness that we don't want this anymore. So here he is. He is in power, and his family has been in power for generations and holding this entire nation in this gridlock. But now comes a dictator who isn't content with just suppressing his own people. He does something outside his own country, like Putin invading Ukraine. Now it's not just a matter of the Russian people keeping Putin in place, because now he's interfering with other countries. And that's when we, as Ascended Master students, we can step in and we can call forth the judgment of Christ, not only on the outer person, but on the forces behind him in the emotional, mental, and identity realms, so that they'll be removed from the earth. Often the last to be removed will probably be the physical person, but there are darker forces behind that person. And when they are removed, his power over the people is diminished. And you can, of course, do the same thing in North Korea, especially for South Koreans who have family in North Korea and so forth. They have the authority to call forth the judgment of Christ. And this can have a major effect. Often, as I said, the last place you see the effect is in the physical realm. But the Masters also see that behind, what happens in the physical is just the tip of the iceberg. An iceberg has 10% of its mass above the water and 90% under the water. And it's the same here. 10% is visible in the physical, or maybe less, and most of what's happening on Earth is just the physical effects of what goes on in emotional, mental, and identity realms. So when you remove the forces, the dark forces and the dark energies in those three other realms, all of a sudden there's an opening where people can make better choices in the physical. So this is one of the things we can really do that helps the Ascended Masters tremendously. And of course, spreading ideas also means questioning things. It's not really a matter of, and this is another thing where we need to recognize here that the law of free will, because what you see so much out there right now in the world, you see all of this anger and hatred, or attempt to manipulate other people or shame them or make them feel stupid because they don't agree with me and all this stuff. So this is not what the Ascended Masters are talking about. They don't want their students to do this, because we are just contributing to the downward spiral or these energy vortexes. They want us to speak with a different voice. And in order to speak with a different voice, we have to be neutral. And we have to simply ask questions. Neutral questions. Why are we doing this? Why is this happening? Is it really necessary? Is it in our own best interest? All kinds of neutral questions like this, where we're not hanging other people out as being wrong or stupid or this or that. We're simply asking these questions. And this can have a tremendous impact, at least in the democratic part of the world, so that we can hopefully move beyond this stage where you see these conflicts between groups of people are growing. Like, for example, in the United States, where you see conflicts between those on the right and those on the left, and it's just increasing. But we need to come to a point where we de-escalate this, and this can be done partly by invoking spiritual light from the Masters to consume the energy, but also by asking these neutral questions. Why is this happening? And we can present that there's an alternative. We don't need to do it this way. This is, in a way, what I've been trying to do in all of my videos, just present that there is a different way to look at life than what we were brought up with. So we can see that there's an alternative, and it might be that some people will find this valuable, that they will find this helpful, that it increases their understanding of how life works. So this is also something we can do. When we have studied the teachings of the Ascended Masters, we can begin to express them in our particular society. Not again as coming from the Ascended Masters, but just the ideas and the questions that are out there. And so these are some of the very important things we can do on the outer. Now, as I said in my previous video, eventually you come to that point where you have a greater sense of oneness with the Ascended Masters, a deeper inner personal connection. And then you can come to a point where you are getting your personal directions from within, directly from the Masters, what you specifically can do for them. And that's, of course, the point you want to go to. And because it's not the intent of the Masters that there should be one person who's telling everybody else what to do. I certainly have no intention of being that person. The intent of the Masters is that a growing number of people increase their inner connection with the Ascended Masters, so they get directions from within, directly from the Masters, without going through any other teaching. And the outer teaching, the outer tools that I'm presenting, they only have that one purpose, at getting you to the point where you have your personal inner connection with the Ascended Masters, and therefore you know from within what is the best thing that you can do for the Ascended Masters. And when you get to that point, then you're where you really wanted to be in your life plan, in your divine plan. This is the goal, the highest goal that you set for your divine plan, is to get you to that point where you can now receive directions from within. And you might then see how to fulfill what you put in your divine plan. You might even receive directions for how you can go beyond what you put in your divine plan. Because it's not that the divine plan is a straitjacket. It has a goal you can reach that's a realistic goal. But if you go beyond it, you can do much more. And you can receive directions from the Ascended Masters on what it is you can do. So I hope this has been helpful to you and inspired you to look beyond me, look beyond the outer teaching, and reach for that direct inner connection with the Ascended Masters. who knows what you can do for them? I certainly don't claim to know. I'm just focused on what I can do. And I hope you can come to that point too, where you know what is your divine plan and your